And good afternoon to each and every one of you. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Township of Douro-Dummer's meeting on the 5th of January, 2021. Sounds kind of funny to say that, but I'm sure we'll all get used to it. We welcome everyone, and I do remind you that we are being recorded, and this meeting will be seen live on YouTube, just so everyone is aware. Now, the closed session of the meeting will not be live streamed, but the remainder of the meeting will be reflected in the minutes, which are the official record of the meeting. We'll hold our meeting just the way we would in a live situation in our council chambers. We'll do the best we can during this COVID-19 to make the meetings as open as possible, and we hope everyone will cooperate with us. We are indeed doing the best that we can. I would like now to call the roll, and we'll see members of council who are at the meeting tonight. Deputy Mayor Moher, first of all. Good, Carl. Councillor Watt. Councillor Landsman. And Councillor Watson. Thank you. Our staff who are here, our temporary CIO is Martina Chade-Hartwick. Martina, a big wave. Our chief building official, Brian Fawcett. Brian, are we seeing your face? Yes, we are seeing your face. I had it covered up. Our manager of public works, Jake Condon, is with us. Our assistant manager to Parks and Rec, Mike Mood. Our senior administrative assistant, Vanessa Sweeting. And our administrative assistant of legislative services, Nicole Zenner, is also here. Staff will have their cameras turned off as we work ourselves through the meeting. So with everyone here, I will officially call the meeting to order. And we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mishi Sagaig Anishinaabe, and we offer our gratitude to our First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Would everyone please join us for a moment of silent reflection? Thank you all very much. Does anyone have any disclosure of pecuniary interest with any of the matters that we're dealing with at tonight's meeting? Okay, seeing none. We are going to ask for a motion then to adopt the amended agenda. It is amended slightly, including the notice of motion that is on later on in the meeting. So a motion, please, to adopt that amended agenda, please. Councillor Watson, Councillor Watt. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Adoption of the minutes. We had a special meeting and a regular meeting on the 15th of December, way back in the year 2020. Could I have a motion to adopt those minutes? Mr. Moher and Councillor Landsman, all in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Any business arising out of the previous minutes? Last call for any business arising. Seeing no hands, we will indeed move on. We're on item 8 now, and this is delegations, petitions, presentations, public meetings. And we indeed do have a public meeting tonight. And this is about a proposed bylaw for animal control. And we are trying our very best to deal with certain situations in our township that have emerged. And we are going to have a public meeting, and we're going to hear from everyone who has comments to make on that. A motion, please, to start the public meeting. Councillor Landsman, Councillor Watson. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Okay, we are officially in a public meeting. We do, from what I understand, have 6 people who have registered to, excuse me, to speak. And I will be asking Martina to introduce those people in the appropriate order. And we do want to hear from everyone who would like to make a comment. So we are in the public meeting. I'm going to ask Brian Fawcett, our chief building official and our bylaw person here for the township. Brian is going to give a complete overview of the whole situation from start right to the present time. And that should update us on where we sit. And then we will hear from you. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you. So through you, your worship, so the basis of this bylaw that's being presented is for an amalgamation of 2 existing bylaws that we already have. One, which is a dog licensing and registration bylaw from early 2001, and a second bylaw regarding exotic animals from 2004. Those 2 bylaws are being amalgamated and being transferred to a bylaw that's similar in format to a bylaw that was recently passed within the township of Selwyn. The reason for that is that we use a third-party agency, the Peterborough Humane Society, as a contract for our Humane Society services, and they would appreciate having a bylaw that is consistent across all townships that they enforce with. So this bylaw is drafted from the Selwyn bylaw, which was drafted from the city of Peterborough's bylaw, and the bylaw in itself works through all of our 2 existing bylaws for dogs as well as for exotic animals, and also includes some provisions for large animal control such as livestock, and as well as certain exemptions that we know exist within our township, such as the exemptions to permit racing pigeons and things like that. The basis of this is that we've been working on this since 2019. The Humane Society, the OSPCA, which is the Ontario Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, used to have the authority for animal control services within the province of Ontario. Due to a court decision in early 2019 regarding the decision that they shouldn't have police powers without police oversight, the OSPCA stepped down from their enforcement activities, leaving municipalities and OPP, OMAFRA, and humane societies to pick up those pieces, respectively, for their different portions of control. So in June of 2019, we started looking at revising our bylaw. Selwyn passed their bylaw in late 2019, early 2020. Then COVID hit, and we've been working through this bylaw just at a slower pace, but now we've brought this back so that it can be reviewed more wholesomely. And I think the bylaw that we have is a good bylaw that'll work through all the issues that we presently have, which is a lack of control over biting dogs, especially. We don't have muzzling orders to order a dog owner of a biting dog to muzzle their dog while it's off their property. And we also don't have control over a lot of exotic animals that, because our exotic animal bylaw is dated, it's quite limited, and there's certain species of exotic animals that don't fit within the bylaw that we do occasionally get questions on, and we would like to see prohibited, obviously, because they fall under the federal or provincial restrictions already, but having them prevented at the municipal level is certainly advantageous as well. So to get into this bylaw specifically, there's a number of provisions that we've received some questions and comments about, and we'll hear from a number of people today to go over those comments. And we'll certainly discuss some of those questions and comments that come up. Regarding the muzzling of dogs, the ability for us to muzzle the dog or have an order to muzzle the dog is certainly a big part of this bylaw. And that's what we want to see pushed through with this bylaw, so that we can have that ability for the Humane Society to come in and place an order on a property or a dog owner for their dog that's known to be a biting dog. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and we can turn it over to the first presenter, and then we'll move through the comments as they come through. I believe that we're in consultation with Martina. We would like to see that the comments from staff be pushed to the end, so that we can have a more wholesome approach to those comments as they come through.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Council members, I will open it up to questions for you at the end. We do have a number of people who have sent in comments. Martina is going to review those. And then we have the people who have registered to actually speak about this issue. So that's how we'll try to handle it and be as organized as we can. And I hope everyone realizes there are legal issues here that we deal with. There are things we can do. There are things we can't do. But I just want you to know we're trying our best to do the right thing, the very best we can do. So Martina, if you could review some of the comments, and then I will ask you to introduce the people who would like to speak to us.
Very good. So we received a number of written comments. Many of them are from people who have also registered to speak. So for those, I will be quite brief, because I know they would like to speak for themselves as well. The first written document received was from John Bell. He's the president of the Ontario Sporting Dog Association. In his letter, he introduces the association, and he states, "I'm writing to you today with some concerns that our members have brought to our attention in your amended bylaw. Our main concern is only being able to keep our dogs on chains for no longer than 10 hours per day. That is being put forward in your amended animal control bylaw. We were contacted by the secretary of the Kawartha Foxhound Club about this change. She was told by your bylaw enforcement that this was part of the recent written Provincial Animal Welfare Act. There is no mention of any restriction, whether it be on time or tethering period, in this act that we can find. In section 4 of the act, he's gone on to attach some documentation. And then he explains on the backside of his letter why they would prefer to have that tethering regulation removed from our bylaw. John is registered to speak, but I don't see him on the line. So perhaps he had something else come up. So I will just read his comments for the record as well. So the amount of coyotes that are all over Ontario is increasing every year, and there are many reasons why it would make more sense to keep some dogs on chains rather than in a kennel, and I've listed them below. 1, we prefer to keep our dogs on chains because when coyotes come into our yards at night, there are some dogs that you just can't keep in the kennel. They will tear at the wire or climb out of the kennel and end up being killed on the road, or we end up in violation of the bylaw as they are at large in the township, and nobody wants that. The dogs can also get injured if they break their teeth trying to get out or cut themselves on the fencing or forcing themselves through the wire. Also, when no one is with them, they could be injured or killed by the coyotes. 2, most of our members are either hunters or sled dog people who use their dogs all winter for hunting or sled dog racing, and our dogs are used to being outside all the time. The reason we keep our dogs outside and don't want them being put into heated kennels is if they are in a heated kennel, the dog's coats do not thicken up for the winter. They need winter coats to protect them while hunting or dog sledding in the cold weather, in case they're in a spot where you cannot get to them, or they lay down and don't come out until the next day and it's not safe to try to get them in the dark. We, the Ontario Dogs Sporting Association, would like to suggest that there be an amendment to this change for all classes of working dogs put into your bylaw. We appreciate the opportunity to speak to council in this matter and are more than willing to meet with council at any time on this subject or in any other matter that we can help with. The next comment we received is from Jeffrey Chalmers from the Birchview Property Owners Association. I do see Jeffrey on the line. He is registered to speak. I'll just read from his email and then he can present his report when it's his turn. So he states, I will speak on behalf of the Birchview Property Owners Association of Douro-Dummer about the draft animal control bylaw. Attached BPOA is the BPOA presentation to council on the bylaw following the BPA board review of the draft, along with our suggestions to include or clarify the bylaw. Schedules to our reports that detail recent dog attack incidents have all had the names and addresses removed on the advice of our legal advisor, as this becomes a public document before council. The BPOA is in full support of council updating the animal control bylaw and strengthening the enforcement provisions of the bylaw. And then he goes on to state that he's looking forward to joining us on our meeting. The next written comment I've received is from Joan Weston. Joan is also registered to speak tonight, but I don't see her on the line yet, so I'll read her comments out to you. In general, what is the allowance for severe bites or working with the OSPCA in the thankfully rare situation in which there should be consideration of a seizure and/or destruction order or a provincial dangerous dog determination made? In most cases, I work with clients who are appealing muzzle orders or dangerous dog designations, but I've also consulted with a large municipality to provide an in-depth analysis and recommendations for muzzling requirement sections of their bylaw. As I understand the draft, there will be an outline for both the management of biting dogs and penalties for their owners. There does not seem to be an allowance or mechanism in which the township is empowered to act in these cases in which the public may be at risk, or an incident is severe enough that, at a minimum, the dog should be placed in the care of a qualified humane society or OSPCA facility until the case is researched and resolved. One quick point I would suggest amending is section 9.4, 2 and 3. This should be reworked to allow for the owners to have their dogs unmuzzled indoors on private property, or when they are in securely fenced enclosed backyards on private property. This will allow the dogs to visit with family and friends to maintain a quality of life for both the dog and the owner. Having reasonable exceptions also enhances the likelihood of compliance. If the law is too vague or onerous, the owners are more likely to simply attempt to subvert their requirements. She states, I will look more at this in depth tomorrow prior to the meeting and would be happy to email any further points to you as you wish. I'm also happy to work with the township in drafting a bylaw framework that is based upon realistic expectations and parameters for dog, pets, and owners' responsibilities to the general community as well as the animal's well-being. Joan is a certified dog behavioral consultant, and she organizes FANGs but no FANGs, canine behavioral consulting services. The next comment we received is from Gwen Little. She states, I've reviewed your first draft of the new bylaw, 2021 XX Animal Control Bylaw. As a professional dog and cat trainer for 12 years and a member of the DPDCKA affiliation, I would like to offer an additional criteria for your proposed bylaw. I would recommend you include the Dr. Ian Dunbar bite scale so that you have a measurable, quantifiable tool to determine the severity of bites that you will need to assess. And then she provided a link to that service. Gwen is the owner-operator of Pause and Train Pet Services. The next comment we received is from Nikki Kidd. She states, I'm writing to you in regards to the new animal cruelty bylaw to be amended in Douro-Dummer Township. I'd personally like to take the time to connect with you on my area of concern under section 4.43, where it states an animal is not tethered for longer than 10 consecutive hours in a 24-hour period. I feel this is completely unrealistic to those animals who fall under the sporting dog and/or guardian dog category. These such animals are not only used for purposes such as livestock protection, but as hunting dogs, and to me, they should fall entirely unrelated to these bylaws to be amended. I feel these animals should not only be exempt from the enforcement, but together should have no relevant relationship to the guidelines set in place. As many others who primarily live outdoors, these dogs are acclimatized to living in these conditions of each changing season. As the seasons change, their bodies regulate them to tell them when they should grow their coat and when to shed their coat. I don't personally see much difference if the dog is tethered or kenneled, as long as the requirement of adequate shelter, tether length, and water is met. Then why would it matter how they are contained? I don't feel that a better life is said to be suitable in a 4x8 kennel as opposed to a 3-meter chain. nor do I feel it's any safer for the animal's well-being. Properly anchored chains and tethers provide much more mobility for the animal and is a secure and safe way to avoid having the animals running at large or worse, being hit by a car. Kennels do not cease these animals from escaping, and many have been known to dig, climb, or chew their way out when they feel the urge. I was told in an earlier email that these new proposed bylaws were copy and pasted from provincial guidelines, and from my knowledge and research, there is no such time frame stated on tethering or chaining an animal. I do, however, understand that this may be brought to attention more for those who keep animals indoor and due to busy schedules feel the need to provide arrangements while at work, etc. I do not feel that those animals fall within the same guidelines as those for sporting dogs and or guardian dogs. I'm reaching out not only to be heard for myself, but for the entirety of my dogs. I personally own animals who would be affected by these changes and not in a positive way. Those who currently live happily tethered or chained, it's for a reason and their own safety. I would be absolutely devastated to have their lives at risk. Please take the time to evaluate my areas of concern. I'm hopeful that you'll see these proposed changes pose more of a threat to my animals' well-being than a positive evolution. The next comment we've received is from Keith Beecroft. He states the following. Just reading through the agenda now. Does this mean that backyard chickens would be prohibited under the proposed bylaw? If yes, I would respectfully ask that this portion of the agenda be deferred for a month so I can put together a reasonable rebuttal. Keeping backyard hens has so many benefits that I would be happy to describe further and would hate to see it included in the same section as hyenas and giraffes. Many urban jurisdictions across the globe, including many in Canada and Ontario, are more densely populated than Douro-Dummer, allow for backyard hens to be kept, so it doesn't make much sense to prohibit them in an area that prides itself on its connection to rural living. If it's as simple as asking for that section to be removed, that would be great. I'm hoping that it's just a clerical addition to the report, including a laundry list of animals, and that the intention is not to ban the keeping of backyard hens. It seems that with each housekeeping item and bylaw amendment, we are losing more and more connection to the rural roots and subsequent food security and natural connections that are so important. Thank you in advance to your attention to this matter. And the last comment we received is from Elaine and Mike Williams. They state, we understand about the meeting tonight regarding dangerous dogs. Mike and I are unable to participate in the meeting as we are already committed. For the township's records being a resort right across from where the dogs live, we do have concerns. We would like to see dogs rehomed, or if that does not happen, a more secure fence for these dogs, as we believe that's how the dogs got out in the first place. They referred to their neighbor and state that they do not have concerns except for dangerous dogs. And those are all of the written comments that we've received.
Okay, thank you, Martina. And you can see how much interest the situation has generated. And I think I need to say that I know we have a situation on Moody Drive that has caused all kinds of consternation, and we're all very concerned about this. But the reality is that this public meeting and this bylaw is about the whole township. We're not zeroed in on one specific issue. When we design bylaws, they take effect for the whole township. So just so everyone knows. Okay, Martina, we have a number of speakers, and we ask you to, stick to the point and let us hear your thoughts. And we're here all ears, and we want to listen to you. So, Martina, you can introduce them in the appropriate order if you like.
Very good. So our first speaker that's registered is Carlos Daniels, and I believe he is on the line.
Hi, Carlos, and thank you for holding in there with us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking this issue so quickly, first of all. So my concern really about the proposal is that, number one, I agree. I like it that there is a bylaw that's similar to Selwyn. This makes sense. On the other hand, what I do not see reflected here, we are only talking about biting dogs. So you're putting small dogs compared to really aggressive, dangerous dogs that in the same basket. So basically, I do not see, so the health of small dogs, of all the inhabitants here, not only on Moody Drive, is at risk, as you know. And I do not see how this bylaw really will protect the safety of the animals here, of the neighbors of the total township. So it needs to be much more concrete. So we have dogs here that have attacked. 2 dogs were basically killed, 3 adults were attacked and bite. So you cannot compare this to a small dog that attacks a postman or whatever. So I think this needs to be clarified, and we need to see how this then will be enforced. If there is a public risk for our inhabitants in Douro-Dummer, I think it's our responsibility to solve it and to enforce that these things get solved. And I don't see this right now in this draft proposal.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Are they all your comments that we're going to hear right now?
Yes.
Okay, no, thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you very much for that. Martina, next.
Our next speaker is Yut Shah, and I believe she's on the line as well.
Hi, sorry, I kind of
There, oh, are we seeing you? There you go. Hi, you. Good.
Okay, well, actually, my question was already asked, so I'm good right now.
Okay.
It was about the acting. How would you act? How will you act as soon as this bylaw passes? And what is the township going to do about existing cases? So that is kind of what I was worried about, but I think you already answered that.
Okay, and for the benefit of everyone, there is obviously an existing case where charges have been laid. It's before the courts, and that does stop us from making a lot of comment about it. So you know, it's the way things are these days. So we can't get specific about particular incidents. It is before the courts. The OPP have laid charges, so we have to let them deal with that. Martina, go ahead.
Very good. Our next registered speaker is Joan Weston. I don't believe Joan is on the line. I'm just looking through the list here. No, she hasn't signed in. So the next registered speaker is John Bell of the Ontario Sporting Dogs Association. And I don't see him in the Zoom meeting either. So
okay.
we'll keep
we will allow them if they happen to pop on. Yep.
Yep. But we'll just keep moving down the list for the sake of efficiency. So our next speaker is Jeffrey Chalmers of the BPOA, and he is on the line.
Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to join the meeting. The BPOA, by the way, is Birch Cliff Property Owners Association, not Birch View. And our association represents members within a quarter mile of Clear and Stony Lakes, from Young's Point all the way up to McCracken's Landing. Not all property owners in that area are members of the association, but this matter is important to everybody, whether they're BPOA members or not. So we wish to participate in this meeting, and I'd start off by saying the BPOA is in full support of updating and strengthening the control and enforcement provisions in the bylaw. Our interest in being part of the solution stems from a series of incidents involving dogs at large and attacks on both persons and other dogs within the township of Douro-Dummer. At the end of our report, in Schedule A, is a timeline about the December 3rd, 2020 Birchview Road attack by 2 large dogs on an elderly woman and her golden lab. This attack happened 2.5 kilometers from the house where the dogs live, also on Birchview Road. There is also additional information from past dog attacks on Birchview Road about 10 years ago that resulted in no action by the Township, OPP, or Humane Society. Schedule B to the report is related to the August 19th, 2018 dog attack on another dog on Fiddler's Lane. In both Schedule A and Schedule B, the names and addresses of persons have been removed as this submission to council becomes a public document, and some of the matters are already or will be before the courts in coming months. The BPOA board have reviewed the proposed bylaw in light of this other information contained in Schedule A and Schedule B and make the following comments and suggestions. And I'd like to go through them if it's all right. Is there time? Okay, starting off in Article 1 in definitions, 1.15, enclosure. It's not clearly defined so as to indicate whether it includes invisible fence or similar electronic barrier, or only actual physical fencing, or something called apparatus. If electronic containment is to be acceptable, it should be more clearly defined and require it to be working whenever the dog is contained by it, with all dogs on the property to be wearing appropriate collars at all times, and the system not subject to outage in the event of a power failure. We recognize that many people have invisible fencing and it works quite well most of the time. When a dog is determined to be a biting dog, we have concerns about invisible fencing being a means of containment. The next definition, 1.25 rather, owner. The definition of owner should be expanded to include any person having care and control of a dog, and including visiting dogs and dogs temporarily residing with a person. And when you look at Schedule B to the report dealing with the Fiddler's Lane incident, that dog attack happened from a visiting dog. 1.37, under control. This relates to animals, relates to all animals, and normally cats run free without restriction, but this bylaw would include a requirement that they not be let out loose. The same would apply to any other pets, and it's not unreasonable restriction. It may be reasonable to apply it to animals other than dogs and then exempt cats specifically as a way to deal with that. 7.2, licenses. All dogs must have tags. There should be a minimum age, perhaps 4 months or 1 year, after which they must be licensed. So we just want you to review that and think about the logistics of getting a puppy and at what point you have to get the license for them. If a dog is licensed in another municipality and is wearing a valid dog tag from that jurisdiction, do they also have to obtain an additional dog license from Douro-Dummer? And we have many instances along Clear and Stony Lake where people, they might live in Selwyn, but they have a cottage in Douro-Dummer, or they might live in Peterborough or elsewhere. And so many already have their dogs licensed in another jurisdiction. 8.5, excrement. Dog owners would be required to pick up wherever the dog may go in the municipality. Perhaps the wording should suggest, and in italics here, wherever reasonably possible. Okay. 9.1, biting dogs. Sentence 9.1 says no person shall permit their dog to bite. It should go beyond that, requiring each owner to take a reasonable care to prevent biting. And 9.2, a biting dog. This sentence should be expanded to include any dog which has in the past been known to have bitten a person in a reported incident causing any significant injury. 9.4, biting dog containment. This sentence requires biting dogs outside the home but on the owner's property to be contained in a rear or side yard. This is not sufficient where there is a corner house. So if you've got a corner lot, that's problematic. And the point is to keep dogs from being close to a public roadway where pedestrians may be going by. The exterior side yard definition and in addition, the front yard definition in the zoning bylaw should be prohibited locations. And just expanding that section to deal with that, the concept here is you're keeping the dogs in a rear yard or side yard and away from public property where there may be pedestrians or cyclists going by. Requiring the gate, if any, to be locked may be excessive. It should be sufficient that the gate cannot be opened by the dog. The containment fence must be appropriate for the dogs being contained. In the case of the Birchview Road incident on December 3rd, the owner of the adjacent property has seen at least one of those dogs jump the fence between their properties. I've been thinking about this since I wrote it also, and I'm thinking if you're not locking the gate, which we view as a problem because people will go out of the house and they'll go through the gate and they won't be locking it all the time, or they'll go out to leave and they won't have brought the key to the gate and they'll have to go back in their house, and before you know it, the gate's not locked. When I think about pool fencing bylaws, there's generally a requirement in them for the gates to be self-closing and self-latching, and I think that concept ought to be considered here, even though we didn't put it in this report to you. 9.7, animal control orders. You should replace the or in the sentence structure with and/or to ensure that you have proof of service should the matter get to court. This gives the animal control officer the ability to use their judgment and more than one means of service of an order. Clause 9.7(1), appeared at least 16 years of age, in italics, is not very reliable. Do you ask for identification and proof of age? And how do you do that? The logistics of it is problematic. 12.1, offenses. Question, and this has been raised by others already tonight. How does a resident get the township to enforce the bylaw, and if warranted, charge a person who contravenes this bylaw in a situation where a dog off leash attacks and bites a person and or another dog, and the person and or dog suffers an injury? How is the determination made by the township to proceed or not to proceed? Under sentence 12.1, past experiences showed on multiple occasions that the parties involved, being the township, the OPP, and the Humane Society, point the finger at the other and say it's up to them. So we want that clear here, and others have voiced that already too. Who's going to be enforcing this? 16.1, transition. We have two very recent cases of dog attacks in the township of Douro-Dummer that resulted in injuries to people and other dogs. These properties and owners of the attacking dogs have been identified and are known to the community in the vicinity. In both cases, the community at large has concerns, and the dogs in question continue to be a threat to persons and animals on public and private property. How are you going to address protecting the public in these cases? Or are we waiting for another incident involving these dogs before anything is done? The draft bylaw ignores incidents that happened before the passing of the bylaw. Noise. The bylaw doesn't appear to address dogs who consistently bark as the ones involved in the Birchview Road incident of December 3rd. These dogs were also left outside most of the day prior to that incident, with little done when they barked at persons in the area. In addition, the Canada Post group mailbox is in front of the next property. So people stopping for the mail, we often had the dogs in the next property barking. And I can't imagine what it's like for the neighbors hearing that constantly. Hopefully these suggestions, revisions, and additions to the draft bylaw will be of assistance in moving it to a final form for passage at an upcoming council meeting. We look forward to seeing the updated version of the bylaw prior to that council meeting. And the Schedule A to the bylaw is a timeline setting out what happened on December 3rd, 2020 dog attack on Birchview Road. And I'll just go through this point by point. So the two large dogs from a property on Birchview Road got away from the property sometime early in the morning. The dogs attacked a porcupine at about the same time, we understand, and they got loose from the property. Around 9 o'clock, a neighbor a few doors away was going for a walk and reports they heard somebody in the wooded area to the rear of the property calling the dogs. Around 9:30, that neighbor returned home and could still hear the person calling the dogs in the woods. Around 10 o'clock, a female senior citizen on Birchview Road left for a walk along the road with her golden lab, Comet. A short while later, by the driveway of another property on Birchview Road, and this would have been about 4 or 5 doors down, they were approached by 2 large dogs coming from a lakeside property. Both dogs had porcupine quills around their mouth area. The person bent over close to the dogs looking for identification on a collar of one of the dogs. And the person did not try to pull out quills as alleged in some of the Facebook posts and by others. The attack happened to both Comet and the elderly woman, and she ended up on her back on the ground holding the dogs off Comet. Comet was above her head and the dogs were on top of her trying to get at Comet. She's crying for help from her position on her back with 2 large dogs over her, injuring her and trying to get at Comet to further injure him. As this is happening, an adjacent neighbor, like another female senior citizen, is sitting in her living room listening to the news on her iPad when she hears something strange. She turns the iPad off, still hears the strange noise, goes to her door, and hearing cries for help and snarling dogs, realizes something is terribly wrong. She grabs her boots, coat, and her light walking stick and rushes to the road where she sees the commotion on the driveway next door and goes to that person's aid. She starts beating the dogs, trying to get them off the first woman. And at the same time, Comet is able to move further away from them and the attacking dog because his lead is loosened from the woman on the ground. The attacking dogs leave her and pursue Comet. The woman on the ground quickly gets to her feet, and the 2 of them proceed south for 4 or 5 doors along Birchview, trying to keep the dogs away from Comet. And now with 2 adults intervening, the attacking dogs separate and the blonde one continues south with the dark colored dogs still threatening and staying in the vicinity. Both women are in shock and running on adrenaline. The second woman flags down several cars, she thinks it's 3, who stopped for assistance. One of the people who stopped assisted in getting the injured woman and dog back home. She took Comet's lead while the woman who rescued the first, who had a badly injured left hand, and that she happens to be left-handed, so her dominant hand is the one that sustained most injuries. Back home, they get her husband to take her to PRHC, and they also phone to get a friend to come and take Comet to Champlain Animal Hospital just north of Peterborough for emergency surgery. At that point, the second person, who was the rescuer, tries to walk back to her home, and the dark colored dog is coming up the road towards her. Luckily, a Douro-Dummer vehicle comes by and they stop to assist. They get her into the back of the cab, drive her home, and escort her to their door, keeping between the dark colored dog and her. The OPP are called, and at around 10:40, she texts her husband, who looks after Facebook posts. The concern now is getting the word out fast, as many people walk along Birchview Road every day and have pets on their property. So she forwards some photos that were taken by one of the people who stopped to assist. And the Facebook post is done on the BPOA site at 10:53 about the attack and that the dogs are still at large, with pictures to warn others. They also start a phone string to contact known people who walk on the road daily. The dark colored dog is still circling the house and up on the front porch. The OPP arrive about an hour after the attack, and of course the dark colored dog wags its tail and hops into the back of the cruiser. The officer speaks with the woman who rescued the first, and a short while later, the blonde dog is also picked up by the OPP. The person who was injured is interviewed by the OPP at the PRHC emergency department, And both the person who was injured and the person who rescued did written statements to the Humane Society and the OPP. Our understanding is that the owners have only received a ticket for the dogs at large and have not been charged by the OPP. The attacking dog owners did pay the initial vet bill. And just to make a point here, the dog attack happened 2.5 kilometers away from where the dogs live, unlike the incidents on Moody Drive where it was a next door property. And some additional information here, the Moody Drive resident involved in that dog attack on November 27th was told by the Humane Society staff that the person attacked on Birchview Road tried to pull out quills, resulting in the attack. The person attacked has confirmed that this is not true. She'd been over looking for a dog tag or identification on one of the dogs. Also, because of the Facebook posts, other people came forward, and a former resident of Birchview Road was attacked multiple times by a dog, and it coincidentally was from the same property, but different owners, different dogs, and this happened about 10 years ago. He was regularly running and cycling on the road, preparing for a marathon. After multiple attempts to have the owner do something to protect the people, he pressed charges and got a conviction and a muzzle order from the judge. This was a different owner and different dog, but it is another example where the Township OPP and Humane Society were of no help. And another former Birchview Road resident was also attacked multiple times at the same address about 10 years ago. She was attacked while running and also while cycling. One time she was running and her husband was cycling with her when the attack happened. No action from enforcement in that case either.
Okay, Jeff, I sure understand what you're trying to say.
Okay.
And I don't think there's a soul who's disagreeing with you. We're trying to find a way to get some control over these things.
Yeah. And the Schedule B description is just outlining the visiting dog on one property attacking and causing the death of a dog on an adjacent property. And the people 2 doors over witnessed the incident with their young grandchildren. So it was a very traumatic situation.
Yeah. And all these stories underline the fact that we need a bylaw that has some teeth in it. I'm sorry for that comparison. But we need to have some power to be able to do these things. We don't have 100 people on staff who can respond to a dog complaint. So we are trying to do our best and try to get a hold of this. And people have to be responsible. Dog owners, my goodness, what is going on? We shouldn't even be talking about this. Then don't have dogs if you can't control them like this. This is totally obnoxious. And we got to find a miracle way of handling this, and that's what we're going to need is a miracle to be able to get a hold of this and protect everybody.
We also recognize that people from time to time, their dogs get off their property and not on leashes, and we see it daily on posts of missing dogs or dogs found, and it happens everywhere.
Everywhere, so, absolutely.
And recognizing that, we hope that any enforcement is reasonable under the circumstances. Right. But when you get attacks happening and injuries to people and animals,
we're with you.
Totally different thing.
Thank you, Jeff. I always enjoy your comments to council over various issues, and we very much appreciate that. Martina, other speakers?
First, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to apologize to Jeff. Sorry for calling the Birch View. I was working on some other items earlier, and so it was stuck in my head. You're right. It's the Birch Cliff Property Owners Association.
It happens all the time, even at our meetings.
And it'll happen again.
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, on our list of speakers, Joan Weston has just popped into the room. She was earlier on our list. Did you want her to speak now or after the next person?
No, that's good, Joan. If you want to go ahead and offer your comments, try to keep it as brief as you can. I know it's hard.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'll throw away my prepared notes. I want to apologize first. Completely on my end, on an error on my end, I got caught up. One of the points I think that I had raised or that I had sent in from a behaviorist, canine behavior perspective, a couple of angles. One of them was I did have a question about sort of the other end, about if you have a severe incident, because I didn't see anything, as I had said to Nicole or before, I didn't see anything that clarifies to me, how does it work with the OSPCA vis-a-vis the dangerous dog legislation if there is a situation where there's where the public may be at risk? The other points were some modifications or some suggestions. Like I said, I'm usually hired to be on the other side because I do the appeals. So, but I did put together a project with the city of Oakville, asked about muzzling bylaws, and so asked for input on that. So, certainly familiar from that side of things, but that was my question. And again, in full disclosure, I have been contracted by Ute and Carlos to write up an assessment of an incident that occurred with them. So I do want to be frank about that's sort of how I've been brought in. And so like with regard to that incident, from what I have, based on what I've been given the information, that sort of would be an example where I'm not sure if the bylaw that we're looking at would suffice to keep the community safe, because it doesn't seem to expand on the safety measures that may already be in place.
Mr. Chair, Carl here. I'm not sure that we should be discussing this based on the suit that's in front of the.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to avoid any particular incident like you're getting into because it is before the courts.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely. I just wanted to be clear about disclosing that. So I didn't want any ethical questions about that. So I just want to be clear. So the question would be then is, again, at both ends of the spectrum, if you're referring to the Dunbar bite scale, what would be the way to handle a severe or a situation where the public is at risk versus a bite per se that may or may not be one that is quite as severe or quite as much presents as much of a danger?
Okay, was that it, Joan? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought you wanted to be brief. That's why I was trying to stop. I didn't want to.
That's fine. No,
I thought you might want to address each point. I figured on the side of brevity will probably keep me in your good graces a little longer.
That's wonderful. And we know we're all concerned about this. We all have, it's an issue. And I also want to say there's 443 other municipalities in Ontario who have the same situations going on. And they also are trying to deal with it. And as we are. Yeah. And there is no magic button to say, whoa, there, solved. Martina, next.
Mr. Mayor, our next speaker is Anne Marie Key of the Lakefield College School.
I saw her on the screen before. Did you disappear on us? Anne Marie, there you are. Welcome.
I am still here, but I have to tell you that my internet keeps going and I turn on and off nonstop. I don't know if that's happening to others or just me.
I think it's just you.
And everybody's frozen right now.
Oh, really? Oh, that'll be you, I think.
So
keep going. Maybe turn your video off.
I think I'll just say that I support what Carlos has proposed, and I won't put anyone through this additional suffering.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's more than fair. And that's what I think we all agree on that. Martina, next, we do want to start wrapping up and coming up with some kind of a game plan here. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I have no other speakers listed.
Okay, I'm going to ask members of council. You've heard everything that you've heard from our guest today. And Brian, don't you go away because I want you to do an overview of what you have heard. Any members of council have any questions of what they heard? This is your opportunity. Okay, Brian, you are there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sheila, now.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just have a couple of comments. They relate to things that Mr. Chalmers brought up, which are in a little bit different form, but in the proposed bylaw. And I guess the other question that I have, would it be something to consider having two separate bylaws like we did before with the exotic and animals, and make this one more for dogs.
That is
That might-
something that is going to be one of our options that we will be discussing later, I hope.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good comment. Brian. There's Brian. Okay, Brian is the man kind of with this on his shoulders and trying to find that secret key to solve this mystery door. And I can't see I envy you. We want to do the right thing. That's all we're trying to do, the right thing, and try to eliminate these situations. Brian, you've heard comments. Let me hear from you now.
For sure. So I think just with respect to all the comments received, I might just go through the points in Mr. Chalmers' report from the BPOA, as it addresses all of the other speakers' comments with the exception of the dog tethering, which I can address separately. I'll keep this brief, but I do want to go through because I think most of these points are already addressed in the bylaw, just maybe in a different format or not 100% clear at the first draft. So the definition of enclosure would include invisible fencing. If we were to provide a requirement that a biting dog should not be contained within invisible fencing, that's certainly something that we could do. We would just have to define it separately. Under the definition of owner, it does already include a person having care and control of a dog, because it says an owner is a person who keeps an animal, and keep is defined as a separate definition. And keep would include any person who, not just the owner. So if you let your dog with someone else, then that person now becomes the owner who is in possession of the dog. Owner doesn't necessarily mean the traditional definition of having the right to the property. Under control would relate to all animals, because again, this is a wholesome bylaw representing all animals, not just dogs. So cats would be included in that. I think reading into the definition that cats have to be under control is not part of that, because even though the word's defined, there's nowhere in the bylaw that says that cats have to be under control. Under control has to be used in a sentence in order for that definition to come into effect. Regarding dog licenses, that all dogs have to have tags. The word dog is already defined, and a dog is not a dog that's more than 4 months or less than 4 months old. So that exemption already exists. So if a dog is a puppy between the ages of 0 and 4 months, then they do not require a dog tag. If a dog is licensed in another municipality and is wearing that dog tag, under this bylaw, they would require a dog tag from Douro-Dummer if they're a resident dog, which is something that we want to maintain, so that we have a catalog of the dogs, and so that we know when a dog is at large and it's brought in by the Humane Society, that we know who to contact, because if it's an outside dog, we wouldn't necessarily be able to get that information as readily. However, we are proposing, not in this bylaw, but in the fee schedule, we've discussed that if they provide valid registration of another municipality's dog license, then we would provide the dog license potentially. I can't say this for sure because it hasn't passed, obviously, in a future fee bylaw, but that we would provide the dog tag free of charge, just so that the dogs are licensed under that provision. Biting dogs, that no person shall permit their dog to bite. Taking reasonable care to prevent biting is the same thing as saying that no person shall permit their dog to bite. A biting dog is defined in the definition, so 9.2 saying that would be any dog that's caused injury in the past. That's already provided in that definition. So I think that's in there. The requirement around containing with respect to exterior side yards, corner lots, irregular lots, that sort of thing, that can certainly be expanded upon. Although I think for now it's sufficient where it is, but that's fine. There was a comment, not on this report, but on another report about the muzzling of dogs outside of the dwelling house, but within the owner's property. And the amendment, which is slightly different than the Selwyn bylaw, is that the dog would be required to be muzzled when in the yard. That is so that if it is a biting dog, it's muzzled anytime it's outside. And I believe that was the reason for that is so that if a dog is a biting dog and the owner decides to leave it outside or in a kennel or in an enclosure or a fenced yard, it can't dig its way out and then proceed to bite someone, as it will be muzzled at that point. Because there's nothing in the bylaw that says that, and nor would we be able to really put anything in the bylaw that says that they have to supervise the dog at all times, anytime it's outside of their building. So having that provision for muzzling outside of the building is the reason why we have that. And then there's just some general wording comments about and or. That's fine. We do have the ability to ask for identification under this bylaw. So if someone was not the person being served, then that's something that we can do. In terms of the offenses and how a municipality would be obliged to enforce the bylaw, of course, under the Municipal Act and provisions, it's the municipality's jurisdiction and determination as to whether or not they enforce their bylaw. And in the failure to enforce a bylaw does not deem the bylaw to be unsupported or out of effect or anything like that. So it would be a circumstantial basis as to whether or not the bylaw gets enforced. Now, we have outside agencies, the OPP and the Humane Society, that will work to enforce this bylaw, and they'll be the primary contact agencies for those reasons. Just one thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit too is just the provincial versus municipal tier of control, which is that dangerous dogs, biting dogs, are generally under provincial jurisdiction under the Dog Owners Liability Act. That's enforced by the OPP. The provisions in here to muzzle a biting dog is to allow for a temporary reprieve before the matter gets to court, so that if we know that there's a circumstance that has happened, we don't need to go to court to get the dog muzzled in the interim while the dog is being assessed. So any provisions regarding dangerous dog assessments, dog bite scales, all of that sort of thing doesn't need to be included in this bylaw, because that's provincial level determination under DOLA. It wouldn't be something that we would need to include in our municipal bylaw, because it's not something that we would necessarily have any scale on. So a biting dog is a biting dog as far as the bylaw is concerned. They would be muzzled, and then the circumstances from that point forward would then be taken into effect. There is a appeal provision in the bylaw allowing the committee to be approached for the removal of a muzzle order, and that order can be removed once sufficient evidence has been provided that the dog is no longer a danger, or that there was an error in judgment or something like that. And those sort of provisions allow us to take immediate action in any circumstance, and that way then we can review after the dust is settled, because if it's in the best interest to have the dog muzzled to prevent a future dog bite, and we were wrong, and that actually wasn't a dog that, say, bit anybody, and that whole story was fabricated or something like that, then an appeal can come forward and we can remove the muzzle, the order to muzzle on that basis. So that allows us to do that. Or if there's a court circumstance, or if the dog is deceased or removed from the home or whatever, then that muzzle order can come off. And then just one more comment regarding the transition, saying there was a comment saying that this draft bylaw would ignore any incident that happened before the passing of this bylaw. That's not what that provision says. That provision says that any act or incident that happened prior to the passing of this bylaw would be under the effect of the old bylaws. Anything that happens after this bylaw would be under this bylaw. However, this bylaw does have wording to allow us to provide an order to muzzle for any dog that is known to be a dog that has been biting. So any incident that's happened in the past, any dog that is a biting dog, then we are allowed to, under this new bylaw, once it is passed, we would be allowed to order a muzzle on that dog, even though the incident happened prior to the passing of this bylaw. So I hope that clears that part up. And then just regarding the barking incidents, that is already covered under our noise bylaw. That's the reason why there's no mention of annoyances, odor, barking, or anything like that under this bylaw, because it's not part of that. It's already part of that bylaw. And then the only other comment is just in respect to the tethering. Generally speaking, there's a piece of legislation called the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act and there's a subsequent regulation under that act, which does talk to dogs that primarily live outdoors. There is provisions in there in that regulation that say that the dog has to be kept secured, has access to water, food, shelter, and shelter, like all those things are required. So even if you had a dog on a tether or you had it in a kennel or an enclosure, you would still require to have it, give it shelter, give it water, even in the winter, so the heated water bowls and that sort of thing, and or fresh water constantly, food. Those are basic necessities of life that have to be provided to all dogs that live outdoors. The difference with our bylaw, and again, this is the same as the Selwyn bylaw, so we're trying to look for consistency, is that there is a 10-hour provision that comes from a guideline, not a regulation, but a guideline from the province for animal cruelty, which is suggesting that dogs are not kept on tethers for more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. Understanding the fact that there are sporting dogs, sled dogs, and that sort of thing, where the owner may want to keep them on a tether as opposed to in a kennel. I think we could entertain a definition for a sporting dog or a working dog or a farm dog or something of that nature, which would allow us to say in the bylaw, no dog shall be kept on a tether for more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period, with the exception of, and we would probably include police dogs in that provision as well, other than the fact that police dogs are generally exempt from the bylaw. We would want to further clarify that police dogs are also exempt from those provisions. I think that pretty much sums up the case, or the bylaw and the comments that we've received so far. But the bylaw itself, I think, answers all of those concerns, and those comments answer all of those concerns that we've received, and I can take any further comments from council at this time.
Okay, and one quick thing, Brian, let's have a reality check. When a situation happens, let's talk about enforcement. What is the reality about enforcement? When we have a situation, who are you going to call, and who's going to react, and who's going to do something about it?
So first priority circumstance, an injury is occurring, a dog attack is happening, the person should call 911. It is an emergency. That is an emergency call. They would call 911. OPP would be dispatched for the call. OPP would generally take care of calling the Humane Society, although the person can call the Humane Society as well. Although the Humane Society is going to say if you're in the middle of being attacked and you're on the phone, to hang up and call 911. Or somebody's being attacked at that moment, or they've just recently been attacked, you're going to call 911. The OPP have the authority under the Dog Owners Liability Act, or DOLA, to enforce the provisions of that piece of provincial legislation. So that's not on the municipality to enforce that. That falls to the police, the OPP in our township. And then the Humane Society, if the dog is still, it has to still be at large. The Humane Society can intercept and contain the dog. So they can basically take the dog and bring it back to the Humane Society location, waiting to contact the owner, maybe having it assessed by a vet, that sort of thing. If the incident occurred yesterday, police non-emergency line is the number to call. You could call us during regular working hours, but again, we only work during regular working hours. If we're unavailable to be reached, then it's police non-emergency line. They enforce this bylaw as well as we do, so they have no problem dealing with that. They would create the incident report and get in touch with us internally. The Humane Society can also be reached in the same circumstance, but if the dog is not at large, then it's not the Humane Society that's going to be dealing with it. They're going to tell you to call someone else, the OPP or the municipality. So it is a little bit confusing for certain circumstances, depending on what's happening. And obviously, if someone's panicked, they don't know what to call, the best number to call is the OPP, because they're going to be the ones to initially react to the circumstance. And if they can't send somebody out because they are tied up with other things, that's a decision that is made by the OPP at that time. There's nothing that we can do about it, and we're not available 24 hours a day. We can only be reactive. We can't be reacting in the moment. So there are provisions in our bylaw. And one thing I did not touch on was fines and fees. We will be applying, once the bylaw has to be passed first, then we will apply to the Minister of Solicitor General with a fee schedule or fine schedule, which will include fines for unlicensed dogs, dogs that bite, that sort of thing, and those will be Part 1 offenses, which the Humane Society or the OPP or bylaw enforcement can issue tickets for without having to go to court for those tickets.
Okay, Brian, we've got a lot of information coming down the tubes. We're going to try to wrap this up. I know Carlos has a comment, and then Deputy Mayor Moher. Carlos, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Not sure, Brian, perhaps I missed it, but my comment was a little bit that we are basically talking about biting dogs, and there is no difference between dogs that really present a strong danger to the public safety. So all the dogs, indifferent if they are small dogs or big dogs, we know that there are dogs that really present a safety risk for other animals, for small children, for elder people, for people that are walking around here. So I think this must be covered in this bylaw. And it's hard for me to understand that this is just, if I understood you right, this is just provincial law. So I think we need to have clear difference. What is a high risk for the public safety here, really, and a differentiator to normal dog bites. I think we are talking two pair of different shoes here. And I don't see this reflected in this draft version.
Okay, thank you for that, Carlos. Carl, and then Jeff, I'll let you have a comment. And then I think Joan, and we're going to wrap it up. We've heard so much that we need to absorb here. And then council are going to have to come up with a game plan. Carl, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone's input. There's been one heck of a lot of input, and my file on this is getting thicker and thicker. And Mr. Chair, I have a resolution that might be a motion to move forward when you're ready.
I think we'll leave that until we get out of the public meeting, Carl. If that's
Sure.
okay, we'll get out of the public meeting and
That's
then we'll
okay.
deal with that. Jeff, did you want to have a wrap-up comment? And then Joan, and then we are going to wrap it up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just two quick things. We're talking about biting dogs, and in one of the incidents that happened multiple times 10 years ago, the person running by was attacked by the dog, but not actually bitten. Just, the dog hit him and flattened him. And this is a grown man running down the road. And so he suffered injuries and all that took 2 weeks to work out, but he wasn't physically bitten. So that was the one thing I wanted to mention. The other was that if council wants to have information about all the addresses and names of the parties that were in my report, I can provide them to you as long as it doesn't become public.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you for that. Joan, and then Brian, you're going to wrap it up and we're moving on. Joan, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Just to touch base, one of the quick questions. I mean, you're talking about Humane Society. Are you talking about the Ontario or your local Humane? Because I'm again because it sounds like, again, I may be wrong. There's no avenue to involve the OSPCA short of if the dog is running at large. Other than that, is it local Humane Society? Is that number one? That's what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's through your worship. It's our local Humane Society.
Okay.
The OSPCA does not have the powers to enforce our bylaws anymore. They've had that power removed through the court decision, so that's not something that they can do. They only deal with cruelty to animals, but
Perfect.
not through that point.
Okay, and then the other very quick one is the invisible fence is, I will say, like I said, and based on, my certification and my research as well, my degrees, that is not, the invisible fence does not provide a safe barrier under any circumstances. That should never be considered as a barrier for what that's worth. And I will say to you, I see that within my practice, but certainly with science as well, we'll bear that out with study. That does not in any way ensure that an animal will stay on the property. And the major risk, another risk with it, as there are many, but another risk is when they do leave the property because they're adrenalized, they're overstimulated in the spirit of a chase or an incident which may cause that arousal level, they will almost never break the barrier to go back. They will never take the shock when they were sort of in a calmer state. So I would caution you very, very much so never to equate invisible fencing as a secure barrier for an animal.
Okay, Point made. You know, we've heard a lot of great things tonight. Nobody's disagreeing with anyone. We're trying to do the right thing here and get some problems solved and do it the right way. And again, we shouldn't have to be talking about this. Why can people not have the responsibility of looking after their dogs? Why should we have to be afraid to walk down our own street? This is ridiculous. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. We could be here all night. We get it. Believe me. I thank each and every one of you for every word. And we're going to try to do the best thing that we can do. I'm going to ask for a motion, please, to end the public meeting from members of council. Mr. Watt, a seconder by Sheila Landsman. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. The public meeting is over. We've got every word you said taken down. We're trying to include everything. So I want to thank each and every one of you, those who are listening on and watching on YouTube and those who joined us tonight. Thank you. We're on it, and I sure hope we can do the right thing for you and us. So thank you very much. Okay, we are going to. I'm sorry.
Just thank you and bye-bye.
Oh, good. Thank you, Carlos. It's nice to get a smile sometimes, you know. It really is.
Life goes
Okay.
on. Thank you.
Now, council have to make a decision on how to move forward here. We have to make a decision on how to try to make this work for everyone. Carl, you said you had something to say at the end. We are no longer in the public meeting.
Yes, this is a very complex issue. And I was hoping we could get something here tonight, but there's just too much information to digest. So I have a resolution here. If you wish, Martina or somebody, I have it written out so I can give it to you after the meeting or whatever, but I'll read it out.
Let's hear it.
Whereas the Ontario Provincial Police and the Peterborough Humane Society are contracted and responsible for animals at large in Douro-Dummer, whereas we've received little or no input from rural and agricultural community, be it resolved that we receive all the input with thanks, that we meet again within 7 business days, and that a new draft bylaw dealing with biting or dangerous dogs only, and that other issues in the current bylaw be brought forward at a future meeting, and that the new draft be reviewed by township legal staff before we meet again within 7 days.
7 business days. Sounds like a reasonable approach. We don't want this to go on for 7 months, that's for sure. We've got to deal with this. That is Carl's motion. Do we have a seconder to that motion? Sheila, you'll second the motion? Is there any discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Heather.
Through you, your worship, actually just a point of clarification to Deputy Mayor Moher. I had you right up until the last couple of points of your motion, and I just want to be sure that I have it correctly. So within 7 business days, council will address the biting dangerous dogs only, and then I missed the last couple of points after that, if you may.
Okay, sure. Or maybe should I read it right from the top in case?
I got the rest personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just that part, Carl.
Okay, be it resolved that we receive all the input with thanks, that we meet again within 7 business days, and that a new draft bylaw dealing with biting and dangerous dogs only, and that other issues in the current bylaw be brought forward to a future meeting, and that the new draft be reviewed by Township Legal Counsel before our meeting in 7 business days.
And
Okay.
that's where I lost you. I'm sorry. The new draft to be reviewed by council, you're referring specifically to the new draft of the biting dangerous dogs only, not the new draft forward
That's
future
right.
other. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Is that the motion you seconded, Sheila? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? We got to move on this. Go ahead, Martina, and then Brian.
All right, for clarification, The direction in the motion regarding legal review, is that for the new bylaw just to address the biting dogs, or is that the whole bylaw when it
No.
comes back?
Just the biting dangerous dogs.
Just that part of it, I think, is what Carl implied. Yeah.
Yes.
To get our legal people to make sure it's okay. Brian?
Just a question. Would this be the biting dogs portion? Is it intended under your motion that it would be a permanent separate bylaw, or is it intended as a temporary interim measure until we pass a comprehensive bylaw?
I would leave, my opinion would be, I would leave that up to staff. We could amend the original bylaw at some point or have a separate bylaw. As long as we get it in an agreement that's a bylaw under the bylaw envelope for the Township of Douro-Dummer.
Okay.
Between you and legal, I'm sure you'll come up with the appropriate method.
Yeah, the question, the reason why I'm asking is just because if we use the framework of this bylaw that we already have in a draft format, as opposed to drafting a whole new bylaw that would take probably longer than 7 days.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Are you okay with that, Brian?
Yeah, it's just with COVID right now, I don't think staff have the resources or to draft a new bylaw from scratch. So if we can't use this bylaw, then we won't be able to do that.
Cut and paste is very valuable these days.
On this one issue only for now, and then we'll deal with the rest. Okay, are you okay with that, Brian?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
If that's council's wish, then we'll proceed as we need to.
Okay, everybody okay? Is everybody understanding what we're trying to do? And we're trying to do it as quickly as we can to protect our residents. I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Thank you. A lengthy discussion indeed. That's one of the longest council meetings we've had, and we've only got one issue out of the way. Okay, moving ahead to item 9. Other business staff reports, committee appointments. Martina has a concept here due to COVID-19, of course, things are not the same, and we're trying to deal with it. Martina, go ahead and explain this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the report that's before you is regarding our committee appointments. The committee appointments are expiring this month, and unfortunately with limited staffing resources, the routine enrollment of new volunteers for the committees was unable to happen. As you know, the request for new committee members is generally posted in October of the year, and the search for the new appointment occurs. Ads and letters were unable to be distributed this year, thus leading to the appointments to expire. There are currently 7 committees that are being affected. They are the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Committee, the Committee of Adjustment and Planning Committee, Historical and Santa Claus Parade Committee, Donwood Parks Committee, and the Canada Day Parade Committee. There's a need to review the council member appointments and to renew and solicit for citizen appointments to these various committees. It would be beneficial if the various appointments could be extended for an additional 6-month term. For many of these committees, they were not able to meet throughout the pandemic, and thus they have work that they would probably like to continue to work on prior to the end of their terms. Further, there's been no discussion with the mayor and council on council member appointments to the various committees. Therefore, I'm recommending that this report be received and that council approves a 6-month extension for all the committee appointments, and further that staff report be brought back by April 2021 on committee appointments.
A status quo approach. I think there's a lot of common sense here. And does anyone want to make that motion to approve that, please? Tom?
Yes, I will make a motion to follow that recommendation.
And a seconder, please. Sheila, call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? All opposed? No? Okay.
No, I thought
That
I had
motion's approved.
said I wanted to make a comment. That's all. No, I'm in favor of it.
Okay. No, go ahead and make your comment. We're not trying to-
No, my comment was just, will the township be getting in touch with the volunteers or the committee members, or do you want committee people to do their own committees, or what?
Martina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think what we'll do is we'll draft a statement that will be emailed out to all of the committee members so they are aware of council's decision, and that a further report will come back, and this will be decided within 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Satisfactory? Good.
Yep.
Okay, that's done. 9.2, we just finished singing Deck the Halls, and now here at council, we're looking at low-level decks. That's the subject from the building department. And Brian, you are going to address this report. Go ahead. Without singing Deck the Halls.
I'll try not to. You wouldn't want to hear me sing.
No.
In respect to this report, this is following from a notice of motion which was presented and duly seconded at the October 6th, 2020 meeting. I contacted our legal counsel, providing them a copy of my previous report, as well as the notice of motion. And legal reviewed it, and I've attached a letter signed by our lawyer with respect to a legal review of passing such a policy. I also canvassed the chief building officials for the municipalities that were mentioned in the motion. And just as a point of clarification, some of those municipalities did not get back to me, but the ones that did, some of them actually do require permits for low-level decks. The ones that don't require permits for low-level decks don't have the same issues as us. They're urban, without water, without conservation authorities affecting their deck building, that sort of thing. Zoning issues aren't an issue as well for them. And one of the CBOs in the mention contacted me and actually advised that they would be considering a reversal of their policy, citing an ongoing legal issue that they have where they were involved in a legal implication as a result of this policy. So considering the letter from the legal team, I am not recommending this policy amendment at this time. The framework that we have in place, which is designed to respect public health and safety, is adequate. And this policy would not protect the public, would not provide for adequate health and safety measures, and I cannot support it.
That's the report from staff. Who would like to speak to it, please? Carl, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Mr. Reed, Mr. Mayor. I guess about 1.5 years ago, I visited Whitby Building Office after hearing about some of the hurdles that a local resident went through with a low-level deck. And to my surprise, after sitting down with the CBO experienced person in that municipality, I found out that a number of municipalities exempt decks that are under 23 7/8 inches. And I guess when I look at the current report of November the 30th, we just heard in the report there was mention that that actually the permits were required in some cases, and that's absolutely true. And my wording of my notice of motion mentions all the municipalities that do not require a building permit for most. That's why I put the word most low level. And there's a number of reasons when that would apply, and it looks like it was mentioned in the current report. I guess one of the other wording is needed to consider, such as conservation authorities, water setback, or enforcement capacity. Even if we did not require a permit, it still does not exempt the client from getting that reviewed by the conservation authority. Just like a farmer doing drainage near a water course. If he's doing tile drainage, he doesn't call our building department. He calls the conservation authority, sets up a plan, has to get a permit. Just recently this fall, I wanted to expand a pond on my personal property, and no involvement with the building department. I called the conservation authority, they come out and went through the whole gamut from start to finish. And that's part of, as a responsible property owner, it's in a buffer area of a wetland, and as most people do, as on the board there, we review many of these each and every month. Just general comments. Because I did most of the research on this, I'm very disappointed that this report appears to attempt to end run around all the research I completed before the resolution was not. I was not invited to a meeting with the lawyer. While in Whitby, the senior CBO had thought all those exemptions of low-level decks was a result of a court challenge in Etobicoke a few years ago, when it was brought up that somebody was told they had to have a permit, but they went to court and they determined that because the Ontario Building Code is silent on low-level decks, they actually won the case that they didn't require it. And since that time, that's maybe one of the reasons why many of these places are not do allow it to be exempt. And there are some examples that I'll review that probably should not be exempt. Previous report that was brought up to us in October, one of the paragraphs said there talked about a certain comment that may taint the argument in this current report. And I quote, as an example, it's cheaper for them to pay out a couple $100,000 in lawsuits each year than to try to spend as much on extra staff and legal fees. On the other hand, as a small municipality, we need the revenue and have the resources to enforce these types of projects. I guess the words "we need the revenue" is problematic to me. And it looks like we're maybe taking advantage of some of our people if it could be exempted for many reasons. A deck is, one of the examples on my research was some of the exceptions that a low-level deck would not be permitted is a deck is not used if it's being used for access in and out of a main entrance of a dwelling, then it can't be exempt. It has to go through a permit. Other municipalities will also suggest that the deck is, if it's secured to the dwelling foundation, then it has to have a permit as well. If it floats on level ground, then so be it. Mr. Chair, I have a motion when you're ready to receive. Have a motion.
Thank you, Carl. I want to hear from other members of council, their opinion on this report. So who would like to speak? And then I will turn it to Carl if you'd like to make a motion. Other members of council, your in-depth opinion on the report that's presented. Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. Just my comment would be completely agreeing with Carl. If it's attached to the house or if it's a means of entry into a house or a cabin or whatever, I can see railings and things like that. But if it's just a deck, as in a platform sitting out on your lawn someplace, I don't see any issue with that. That's just my comment.
Thank you, Sheila. Anybody else? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. There's certain circumstances where I do believe it is necessary, but then there's other ones that I don't, and I don't see, a foot-high deck. Someone isn't going to fall and break their leg or anything like that. And I think that was discussed at the last one. So, and I think I was quite in favor of this motion, notice of motion last time. So I'm going to stick with my my previous.
Anybody else? Okay, Carl, let me hear your motion now, please.
Thank you. In light of the many factors, I move to defer this report until such time as a recommendation that comes closer to the original notice of motion, that such exemption will not be a material alteration of the building structure.
That's the motion.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder to that motion? Mr. Watt. Anyone want to speak to the motion, please? Speak to the motion. Brian, did you want to comment on it before I ask for the vote?
Just a very brief comment. The definition, sorry, I your microphone cut for me, probably just for me. Can you just repeat the tail end of that sentence?
Sure. That such exemption, well, maybe I better do it from the top. In light of the many factors, I move to defer this report until such time as a recommendation can come closer to the original notice of motion, that such exception will not have a material alteration of the building that it's nearby.
Okay.
Okay, that is the motion. Everyone clear? Going to call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Next item is a request for a second entrance. Jake is going to deal with this one. This is at 2202 McCracken's Landing Road. Jake's the man who makes determination if this is a feasible request. So Jake, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Request was received on behalf of Mr. Brown for second entrance at 2202 McCracken's Landing Road. Mr. Brown is requesting the entrance in order to access a proposed detached garage on the property. As the entrance permit policy states, a second entrance must be approved by council. I have included a map illustrating the proposed entrance location. I visited the site and reviewed the proposed location. It is my observation that there's no issues with sight lines, or the entrance would not impact traffic on McCracken's Landing Road. My recommendation is that the Public Works Report 2020-02 dated December 18th, 2020 regarding the second entrance at 2202 McCracken's Landing be received and Mr. Brown's request be approved. There also is no financial impact to the township, as all costs will be paid by the applicant.
Thank you, Jake. Very, very clear. Could I have a motion from anyone? Sheila? You're muted, Sheila.
Sorry. Yes, I would make a motion to follow Jake's recommendation.
And a seconder? Carl?
Second it.
Any comment on the motion? All in favor?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, Heather. I'm sorry,
Thank
but when I
you.
see your hand go up, Heather, there's about a 3-second delay. I don't know
worries,
why.
that's
It must
okay.
be your internet, but go ahead.
Fair enough. Thank you. Just a question on clarification. This particular address, unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to go out and see precisely where it is. But is this, oh goodness, to the, away from the lake? I don't know what direction we're going in, like away from Golf Course Road, away from Birchview Road, like that kind of cluster of, is it in the open stretch?
Yeah, this is would be south of Golf Course Road.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're going to call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Item 9.4 is an update on recreation facilities, and I point out that Mr. Mood, who's with us tonight, this report was prepared prior to the lockdown that we just experienced, by the way, just so you know. Mike, you go ahead and give us a Reader's Digest version of the report that council have had the opportunity already to read.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, through you. You're absolutely correct. Things have changed considerably for the Recreation Department since that report was made. So currently the report or the facility is actually closed right now to the public until further notice. For January 24th, I believe, is the date we can reopen it unless the lockdown gets extended. So it was just a report to update you guys on some of the struggles that we've kind of gone through, hurdles that we had to overcome with the community and reopening, and the processes that we had to prepare for so we could actually reopen. So as of right now, we are closed, and we have reduced our staff staffing levels due to the fact that we don't have the need. But if you guys have any questions you want me to answer, then just ask away.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a tough road for everyone, particularly in your neck of the woods, and I just want to thank you for everything you've done to try to make the best out of things that are beyond your control. So hold in there. We got to get this over with, and if we all obey the rules, maybe we'll have public skating again. Carl, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mike, for all the details here. I thank you as well for all the ever-changing administration there. There was one thing I noticed on the Ontario policy under page 3, right at the bottom under actions, under number 3, how you control the risk of transmission. And it's suggesting reusing face coverings are required for staff. I think since that time, have the province not recommended reusing, that we use throwaway for face masks? Like, I think I've heard a couple of stories about why reused face masks can be scary for infection control.
Yeah, absolutely. In the beginning, we had some washable, reusable face coverings. Since then, we have provided all staff with disposable unit masks. Okay. So we do have that all in place for our staff, as with
they're getting pretty cheap these days.
Absolutely. No, we do have that readily available to all staff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Mike, kind of like twofold question. The first one, what users have we had over the last month and a half? Has it just been minor hockey, or has there been any men's league, or is there anything on top of that?
Minor hockey right now is our greatest user. I believe it's about 35 hours a week that they require, or 30 hours a week, sorry, right now. And then we do have multiple men's groups. Lakefield College has started up. We've got some girls training practices, basically. And that's basically all we had really room for right now, because typically minor hockey didn't use that much ice at the actual Douro Community Center. So it's been unfortunate that some of our regular users in that facility have not been able to use them.
Okay, my second part then, I guess boils down to how much communication we have with these user groups and what their thoughts are on going forward. We don't know. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, so we don't know whether this lockdown is going to go another month, whatever I got. And I know it's a lot of money to keep this arena, even one arena, going with no revenue coming in. So I just didn't know whether there's been any thought from their side as to how far we extend this before we pull the plug on it. And I mean, it's a tough one. I'm not trying to say I don't want kids playing hockey. I love it. I miss it completely, but I also have to look at it from our business aspect, being a counselor.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now that we just got back from the break, so I'm sure that we'll have those talks when we get closer to that date. I think everybody's hopeful that we can continue play after the 24th. If whatever reasons the province does decide to extend that, I think we'll definitely be revisiting that and making a decision, a hard decision for the community, whether we keep the ice or take it out early again. It's not an option I don't think our community wants to see, but I understand that it is quite the overhead costs. I did do some numbers with Martina there the other day, and it's approximately 30 to 35,000 in revenue losses right now. But with us not being opened, it's approximately $7,000 to $8,000 less in staffing, so that helps compensate a little bit of that. Our cleaning supplies will be down. The sanitizing this year has been through the roof because of all of the steps we have to actually take after each rental. We have taken precautions, and we've turned the plant temperatures up so that we're not running at a lower temperature, just to maintain the ice without incurring as many costs with like the users actually using it. So to maintain a safety perspective on the ice temperature. So
Good, you're doing what you can, Mike, and it's a reality check. The reality is, it is what it is.
Absolutely.
Anybody else before I ask for a motion, please, to receive that report? Martina?
Just a comment in response. I just want to state that Mike's has been in contact with all of our user groups throughout this whole time period, right from when we were trying to start up through all of our different iterations of our plans and procedures and every time something has changed. So I just wanted to say that we've been in close contact and we've had multiple meetings with minor hockey as well, in person and over the phone, to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we'll continue that type of contact throughout this lockdown, and hopefully we can get back on the ice soon. But if that's not possible, we'll be having those contacts as well. So,
And I hope
we'll be
we have
bringing this back to council as well. So
I hope we have a high level of understanding and not pointing fingers. And
everyone's been great to deal with this year. So
we got to get through this together. Okay, who would like to make the motion to receive that report then, please? Tom and Heather. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Moving to item 10, committee minutes, other reports. Deputy Mayor Moher with a quick update on county council matters.
Yes, not a whole lot new. All of you know that Jay Murray was elected or voted on to continue as county warden for the next 2 years. Congratulations, Jay. I'm sure you'll continue doing a good job at the county level. The budget will be into budget at the county very, very shortly. A lot of the preliminary work by a newly founded financial committee has been completed, and that should help speed up the process, especially the capital items. And I also like to mention that the breakout of COVID at Fairhaven is resolved and back to safe levels. It's an ongoing thing, though. It's a constant foot on the pedal to keep things under control. So the CAO there and his staff, Lionel Towns and his staff, are doing a superb job. The board is very, very pleased with all the staff, which is over 300, how they've continued to manage the infection very, very well there. So I thank them very much from a community standpoint that they're doing a good job, and the residents. Lionel has actually received hundreds of emails of thanks from families. So
good.
Even though he's had to turn them down as far as visiting and so on, from a stand that they can't visit their loved ones, but still they recognize that he and the staff are keeping them safe. So that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl. Things are going very well. The only thing I would add to is that the members of county council are all working together very effectively with our service delivery review recommendations, and every member of county council is very heavily involved in one committee or another. It's a terrific example of how councils can indeed work together. Thank you for that. Item 10.2, departmental reports. You've all read them in your package, available to everyone. 10.2.1 to 10.2.6. A motion to receive all those very well done reports. If you'd like to bring one out, feel free. Carl, you're going to move it?
Yes, I'll move it. I've got a couple of questions.
Okay, Heather, you'll second it? Good. Okay, who's got questions? Go ahead, Carl. Under what category?
I just wonder if there's any a number of outstanding accounts payable that carried over into the new year, probably from roads and from the community centers. How is that going?
Tina, can you handle that one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll have to ask finance staff about that. I know that at the community centers, there's been quite a bit of work done to collect outstanding payments, and then also to remit overpayments back to users who had overpaid their accounts. So I know that work is taking place, but I'm not sure about other outstanding accounts receivables.
One other quick one, and that is the mesh training. I notice it's ongoing and so on. Are we 50% through or 25% through? It's a comprehensive training process. Just wondering how we're making out there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't give you an exact percentage. If Jake was here, he'd be able to speak more to it. He may still be on the line. But I know that many of the modules are up and running and they're being used in daily monitoring, patrols, the weather, taking records of deficiencies and things like that. So it's being actively used across the department, but it's one of these rollouts where you don't want to do it all at once because you'll miss something. So you want to go module by module to make sure it's being rolled out effectively.
No, I agree. And payroll is yet to come so that we give Jake a day off every 2 weeks.
Yes. He has a weekend now, so someone's helping him with that, thankfully.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Anybody else? Motion's on the floor then, duly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. 10.3 is the Planning Committee, their minutes of December 18th. A motion to receive and adopt those minutes, please. Sheila? Seconder, please. Tom? All in favor? That motion is approved. Bylaws, we have a number of bylaws here. I'll ask Martina to quickly give us a review of what they're about and then one motion for all the bylaws. Go ahead.
Very good. So through you, Mr. Mayor, bylaw 2021-01. That's the bylaw to amend the appointment to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Committee. Bylaw 2102 is the bylaw to amend the appointment committee for this Committee of Adjustment and Planning Committees. 2021-03 is the bylaw to amend the appointment to other boards and committees for 2019 and 2020. And then 2021-04 is a bylaw to amend the appointments to the Donwood Parks Committee. 2021-05 is the bylaw to amend the appointment to the Canada Parades Committee. There's also a bylaw 2021-06 that's to authorize borrowing from time to time to meet current expenditures during the fiscal year ending 2021. That's a yearly bylaw we do to allow for lending throughout the year. 2021-07 is a bylaw to provide for interim tax levy and payment of the interim taxes for the year until the final tax rates are approved.
Thank you, Martina. And I truly hope that the appointment of the Canada Day Parade Committee is an active group this year. Let's hope so. That would tell us a lot. There are the bylaws. A motion, please. Carl and Heather. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. We have some action items. Martina, do you have another action comment?
I don't have a comment about the action items. I just want to return back to Deputy Mayor Moher's update on counting council. I didn't catch the voting on that. I was wondering if it took place or if we could have a vote on that, please.
Oh, I thought well, maybe we didn't. I don't know. Maybe we didn't. Okay, Sheila, you'll move to receive that then?
Receive the county council report.
Okay, and
Second.
Tom will second it. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Good picking, Martina.
Thank you.
Action items, Township of Matchewan, about grant application deadlines. Carl?
Just a question on that, Mr. Chair. I wonder if Martina could comment on that. Do you need us to support that resolution? Is that an issue that would be helpful to staff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor, I would very much like council to support this motion.
Okay.
Similar to Matchewan, we're a small municipality and it takes us a little while to prepare these grant applications, especially if they need resolution from council. for us to get our report to you with a business case and then to also complete the application in time. It is a struggle. So if the province had a bit more leeway for smaller municipalities, or it was done on a population basis, so if you had X amount of population, this was your due date, and then it went up appropriately, that would be very helpful.
Okay, based on that, I would move to receive and support it.
I truly wish groups like AMO would help pursue these things rather than us having to do that, but it's all true. A motion, and Heather, did you second it? All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Township of Nairn and Hyman, they have a resolution with the closure of non-essential businesses during the pandemic. What is your decision on this one? Anyone? You've all read the report? No comments from anybody? Heather?
Your worship, I think this one and the one below 12.3 from the town of Kingsville are of the same vein. So I'll lump them together and move that we receive them.
Okay, Heather's motion then is to receive 12.2 and 12.3. Seconder to that. Sheila, all in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. And the last of our action correspondence is from Warsaw Winter Sidewalk Maintenance. We have a letter from a couple of our ratepayers from Banks Avenue, and they want to look into sidewalk maintenance, particularly in the winter, and I think it's a very appropriate request. Carl, go ahead.
Thanks. I want to thank Donna very much for identifying this, and I would move to receive it and refer it to our manager of Public Works for a recommendation.
Very reasonable request. Carl is making that motion. Sheila, did I see you?
Yes, sure.
You seconded that? Good. Moved by Carl, seconded by Sheila to put this to our Public Works people, and let's see if we can't get this done. Tom, did you want to say something?
Yes, if I could, please. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we've this was a project that we took on. I think we had some help with it through the county, stuff like that, but it was also, I believe, some township money went into this. And these ratepayers came to us before to get this. There's a lot of people up that area that walk this, babysit, come down through the village, kids going to school. And yes, I think it's very, very worthwhile. I know we don't do all our sidewalks, but this one does get used a lot, and the township has a big investment in it. So I'd like to see, go to staff and come back with a recommendation on it, and maybe a cost on what it would be to add it to the one that we already do from the former butter tart factory up to the school.
And that's exactly what Carl's motion has been put forth, and that's what Sheila seconded. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Correspondence information items. You've all received these as well, 13.1 to 13.3. It's before you. One motion, please, to receive those from Carl and who else? Sheila, okay.
I'm going to comment on one of them.
Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, the one on 13.2, the 5-year poverty reduction strategy. I know, I think that Warsaw Public School and the Douro School, St. Joseph's in Douro, have food programs there that I don't know whether they apply for grants. I'm sure with COVID on, the breakfast program may be off in total, but I wonder if we should reach out to them if they could use some sponsorship from the township to support their cause, if they are applying for money to buy raw food or whatever. It might be a good incentive, because knowing some people that have worked in that program, it's a huge, it's in our community big time that kids do need some nutrition from time to time. And this is a good way to support it if we can help them at all in the grant writing or whatever.
Are you including both the schools in our township?
Definitely.
You're making that a motion then?
I would move that I think the other motion is probably on.
Well, we have a motion. First of all, the motion is 13.1 to 13.4 to receive the correspondence. That's what we're doing. And who made that motion? Sorry. Carl did?
Deputy
Carl
Mayor
and-
Moher and Councillor Landsman.
Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, that motion's approved. Carl, go ahead with your motion then.
I would move that we reach out to both our public schools to see if they can, what's being offered by the minister here for the province of Ontario for children, community and social services, to see if there was anything we could do to advance any opportunity for funding of their food program, either now or after COVID.
A seconder to that motion. Tom? All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Good. Accounts to December 17th. Sheila?
Yes, I would make a motion to receive and pay these accounts, and if someone would second it, I do have a question.
Is someone going to second? Tom? Yes, go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, on page, I think it's page 119, there are quite a few that, and it was spoken about earlier in the meeting, where there are overpayments and there's no description of anything. And I just wondered if it's quite a few numbers. I was just wondering if there's more information on that.
Go ahead, Martina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We've removed the names of those renters because it's not public information who our renters are. We keep that private. And so that's why there's no names listed in the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, Carl.
I had a couple of questions. The library wheelchair ramp, $68,000. I believe a good portion of that was funded by a grant that we received. Is that true? The good majority of it was funded by that?
Martina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That is correct. There was a federal accessibility grant the library received to pay for that work. I don't remember exactly how much they received. Perhaps Councillor Watson, as the library board rep, remembers the exact number. Otherwise, I can find it and come back with that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, I don't. I do know that this amount that is being spent was an extension because the work was to have been done earlier in the year. And just again, due to COVID and trying to line up the trades to be able to do that work. But this work, I believe, began in 2019, if memory serves me correctly. And then it abridged into 2020 with the intention that it would be done by March 31st of 2020, but then got pushed out. But I don't recall, unfortunately, the full amount of funding.
Okay, perhaps that could be verified then, Martina, and we can answer that question. Yeah.
Yep, very good.
Good, Carl.
And one last question. On page 6, there's a bill in there for beaver removal. I know you probably can't identify who it was, but maybe if you could send me an email as to who it was that we contract the work to at some later time, or have Jake do the same. Please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you. Deputy Mayor, you cut out on me there. What is the information you're looking for?
It's page 6. We hired somebody to do beaver removal. Can you, I know that you probably, for privacy, can't identify the who, but can somebody email me the name of who we used?
Oh, the contractor.
Please?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything?
That was it.
Anything else? Okay, that motion then is on the floor for accounts. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Okay, moving right along now. Notices of motion. Councillor Watt articulated a notice of motion that was duly in the agenda. So we will, the way the process works, if we get a seconder, we'll vote on it. If we don't get a seconder, it will come back to the next meeting. And that's just how it works. So Councillor Watt, if you want to read your notice of motion so everyone is clear on what it's all about.
Martina, do you happen to have a copy of that? I don't, I didn't get our final one. I know we had to readjust it.
Yeah, just one moment. I'll pull that up for you.
Thank you.
I can read it out on your behalf. So Councillor Watt's notice of motion stated, whereas Resolution 2022-2020 provided direction regarding the recruitment of a chief administrative officer, and whereas Resolution 222-2020 provided for a contract of 3 years plus the possibility of 2-year extension, be it that the wording regarding the term limit for the contract of the chief administrative officer position be removed, and that all other parts of Resolution 222-2020 remain in effect.
Okay, that, Councillor Watt, that is the notice of motion you're putting forward?
That is correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I will ask if we have a seconder at this meeting to deal with that. Sheila? We do have a seconder. Comments on the motion? Carl, go ahead.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. If I recall, I was part of a very rigorous debate back on June the 2nd regarding against restrictions such as this. And Councillor Landsman, Watts, and Watson, who voted for such restrictions, have I made detailed comments. I'm curious as to what has changed. Could there be comments that because I remember it went on at length at that meeting about why we should not, and I know there's been a bit of water under the bridge since that time, and I'm curious.
Yeah, is there some information that we don't know? Go ahead, Tom, it's your motion.
Okay, and I think this came up before. When we were doing our service review, part of the talks that we had with them was that was the way that things seem to be going these days, and you know, that maybe we should look at this as just a contract position with certain timeframes on it. And so that's kind of where we went with it in the first place. But when we've been talking to our consultants now that are looking into this for us and going to, you know, hopefully find us a really, really good candidate to hire, his thoughts with his experience was not to put that in there. That was a big deterrent. So I thought, you know what, that's good enough to me. He's the professional on it. And, you know, contrary to what our original information was, but they don't do it on a full-time basis. He does. So that was my reasoning for coming back with the change.
Yeah, very confusing indeed, because we did have a lengthy debate over this and all of a sudden it's changed. So anyway, that's it. The motion's on the floor. Very curious indeed. We will call, go ahead, Sheila.
No, I agree with what Tom is saying. When we were having discussions with Patrick, and that came up, and he was quite clear on that, and that's what I think made my mind change. That's all. Okay. I just want to say that.
No other comments on the notice of motion? Go ahead, Heather.
There we go. Sorry, I lost my mouse. To turn off mute through your worship, and to Deputy Mayor Moher. I personally, and you know, I can only speak myself, that the much of the rigorous debate, at least for me, back in June, was speaking to other factors in the motion that are still standing, that are still on the table, that aren't specific to the contract extension. So I see that my colleagues have made a motion and seconded duly to remove the contract extension. It's something that I support because, again, to echo Councillor Watt's sentiment, it's something that the HR consultant, who is a professional as an HR consultant and a recruiter who's going through this process, that makes sense to me. But the other matters in the original motion that we debated on June 2nd were matters that were of great importance to me and are still remaining in that motion.
Okay, that motion's on the floor, duly seconded. Very curious. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. We are now going to go into closed session. And the reason we're going into closed session is for proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. And that is the only reason. And we will come out and we will stop our recording and our live feed on YouTube. We'll take maybe a 2.5 minute break, and then we'll be back with closed session. And that will be it for the night. And we will end our meeting following that. So I will have a motion to go into closed session, please, for those reasons. Tom and Sheila, all in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. A 2.5 minute break. Everyone just mute your video and your audio, and we will be right back. Are you there, Martina?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I'm just working on getting our screen share and turning off the other items.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment I want to make to you.